So this next group of items comes with a story. Those of you who know my channel by now know I usually have a story. So this story starts back in the fall at one of the tractor shows. It was the Zagray tractor show, Zagray Farm tractor show in Colchester, Connecticut. I was there for that show and flea market, and I was going along from vendor to vendor, and I saw this vendor who is there like he comes to all three shows every year, and apparently he goes around to other shows too. So I spot this microphone down on his blanket of junk, and I say to him, how much for the microphone? And he says, yeah, I brought that because I have an old radio that goes with, and I meant to bring the radio, and I forgot the radio. So I asked him, well, what kind of radio was it? Because I'm curious, and he's like, I don't remember. It's a real old one. So he couldn't remember the name of it, but I was, mildly intrigued. So he says, if you're coming back tomorrow, I'll bring it. Well, it was Saturday, and the show was 2 days, so he was hoping I'd come back on Sunday, and he'd bring the radio. Problem is, that show's, it's an hour drive for me, so I wasn't coming back for a second day. Especially for a radio, I had no idea what the heck it was. So he took the microphone and put it in his pickup truck, because he said, he's not going to sell the microphone. And the microphone is in really bad shape. So you're probably thinking, hey, well, Steve, how'd you get the microphone? Well, fast forward to November of 2019, and I'm at the Thompson Speedway flea market and swap meet. And I buy all that ham radio gear that we just went through, and I get a hell of a deal on that for $50. And I'm thinking, wow, what are the odds of running into something like that here at this swap meet that's mostly, racing and automotive stuff, right? But there's a little bit of everything at these things. So I'm almost done for the day. I'm going out near the gate that I didn't come in because I kind of made like a big loop around, and I'm going down like some of the last rows, and in the corner, way up in the corner near the fence, I'm walking along, and all of a sudden I look down and I see these radios, and I take a look at the guy sitting on a stool, and I realize it's the same guy from the tractor show. So I jokingly say to him, I said, hey, he says, those radios remind me of something. I said, let me tell you a story. And I basically tell him the story that I just told you guys. And he's like, oh, and he had no idea. He didn't get that I was joking around with him a little bit there and saying, hey, it was you. Because he didn't remember that I was the guy. But I remembered him, and I remembered about those radios. So sure enough, he had the radios. So we ended up ratchet jawing about it. And I'm looking at the things. I'm pulling them out and looking at them. And I'm going to get to the radios in a moment. And we finally make a deal. And I think I ended up getting him to take $150 for this stuff. So let me show you. This is the microphone. Let's go. Let's get this out of the way right now. This thing is rough. The chrome is not in great shape. The head is loose. All right. So that's not ideal. Could probably fix that up. This is also something interesting. I can put my finger right in here. There's nothing in here. This is an Unamplified D-104. Okay? So this basically has no board in it, no battery or anything. Look at the chrome on the back there. Not so great. So a while back, I did a series on the tools that I picked at the Thompson Flea Market in November, and I mentioned the radios, and I didn't get into it because I said I wanted to do this separate video on the radios. And one of the things I did was I mentioned I talked about this radio not by name, but I talked about it being a vintage boat anchor CB radio from the heyday of CB radio, and I asked people to make their guesses as to what the radio would be. And somebody, forgive me if I can't recall your name right off the top of my head, but somebody who watches my channel took a guess, and they would have been correct because they said a Browning Golden Eagle. They didn't get specific because then you're really getting lucky if you happen to guess whether or not it's a Mark III or a Mark IV or whatever. I don't remember exactly how the nomenclature on all of these Golden Eagles works. This is a Mark IV, and I know that they made a Mark IV-A. And then there was the Mark III, which many consider to be a superior radio to this one. And then there was a Mark II, which was a radio that had multiple sections. So this radio right here is 2 sections. I'm going to show you the other section in a moment. So you get a transmitter and a receiver in separate boxes, and there's an interconnecting cable. And what happens with these radios is when you key the transmitter, it shuts the receiver off, and there's a little lag in when that receiver dies down. And what that causes is that causes feedback. So the Browning Golden Eagles have what is known in the industry as the ping, the famous ping. And what the ping is the ping is basically a feedback loop that's getting cut off right at the beginning. So if you kept the receiver on and you kept it on and it didn't shut off when you transmitted, because they're in such close proximity to each other, you would get a feedback loop. The microphone would pick up audio that would be transmitted, come out the receiver's speaker, go back into the microphone and cause a vicious runaway loop, and you get feedback, that high-pitched squeal. So by design, the radio is designed to actually shut the receiver off when you key the microphone. But because of that slight delay, when the circuit's de-energized, there's a chance for a brief start of feedback that fades off, and it causes a ping noise. And the Brownings are known for that. You can tell when a Browning comes on the air, because when the guy keys up, if it's a good working Browning and everything's working normally, it'll have a ping. So, anywho, this is a Mark IV. So what the Mark IV has that the predecessor, Mark III, did not have is it has a phase-locked loop, an IC chip in there that can synthesize frequencies and allow you to go to 40 channels stock. So this has an LED readout here to show you the 40 channels. We've got a signal meter here, and we've got I think this is an on-the-air light or something like that. So this must be the transmitter. Yeah, so we've got the SWR meter connections selector here, SWR calibration, your mode switch, because this is an AM and dual sideband, upper and lower sideband unit. We've got I don't know what this switch here does. And we've got the LED and reset test. We've got a spot. Okay, the spot button is used because you can tune the frequency of the receiver independently of the frequency of the transmitter. So if you want to have them both locked onto the same frequency for a normal conversation, you use the spot button, which allows you to sync the receiver to the transmitter, because the receiver has a variable knob, so you can actually slide between frequencies. Whereas this, because of the synthesizer in it, will actually lock on to one frequency right on the dot, or at least it's supposed to. That's when it works well. These had quite a history of problems, the Mark IVs, and a lot of those problems, from what I understand, were resolved in the Mark IV-As. So the one to own for actual radio to talk on that would probably be a better radio would be the Mark IV-A. This is a Mark IV, but hey, they come up for sale, on eBay, big money. You rarely see them come up for sale. This was just complete luck that this came up. Or was it? So I think the cover is, the cover's loose. Yep, no screws in it. Okay. It just goes to show you. It's been a long time since I read about these radios. So maybe I'm completely wrong here. Maybe the PLL chip didn't come out until the 4A, the Mark IV-A, because I'm not seeing, unless it's up here on this board in the front panel. But that's not what I expected to see in here when I opened this up. Huh. Well, anyways, so overall condition, loaded with dust. The chassis is not all rusty as hell, which is a good sign. And the reason why I was concerned about that is, well, let's get the receiver over here and I'll show you why. So get a load of this. What we're looking at is an original Browning box. Browning Laboratories Incorporated, Laconia, New Hampshire. So this is the original box for a Browning, most likely this one. And when I picked this box up to carry it, it was wet. This had been staying out all night, and the morning dew was all over it, and it had been wet. And I kind of got the feeling that he was in the habit of doing that regularly and had been toting this around. There's mold on the box here. This is kind of nice. The original Browning Mark IV base station operating instructions. Okay, really basic, but anyways. In fact, this might tell us the theory of operation. Oh, so I was just looking in this owner's manual, and the theory of operation is described right up here in the front. And it says the features of the transmitter: new phase lock loop, generated frequencies, 0.002% tolerance or better. So that's the improvement there. And interesting, the receiver does not say anything about that. It says Varactor band spread control with full 300-degree rotation. It's got a solid state regulator, new Vista RF amplifier for high gain with low noise, blah blah blah. But anyways, new printed circuit board design. So I think that the PLL chip was problematic on these original Mark IVs, and I think there are probably modifications or conversions that can be done. So anyways, let's get this receiver out of here. So unfortunately, the receiver, having been in the box, looks like it's got mold growing on it. So we got an RF gain control, tone control, power on and volume all in one, squelch, an A&L switch. Here's the band spread. Here's the tuning. We got AM, lower sideband, upper sideband mode switch, and then this over here is CB1, CB2, and XTL. I think XTL is for when you want to hook up a external VFO on the back. CB1 and CB2 must be maybe the two bands. Yeah, I bet you that's, you can see up here on the tuning knob, CB1, CB2. There you go. So when you want to go above channel 27, you actually have to flip this to CB2, and then you go to 28 to 40. And then, it's interesting, this actually shows frequencies above channel 40, 27.415, 27.425, all the way up to 27.595, which I think gets you into the 10-meter ham bands. I'm not positive on that. Screws in this are also missing. So this shield is just kind of flopping around. And look at, somebody took this shield off, which is supposed to be held down to this, and then these nuts go on from the underside of the chassis to hold this on, and somebody just left it on there loose, but they put the nuts back on the studs so that they wouldn't get lost. So somebody's been poking around inside here. Okay, well, we got a tube missing here, and we got two little funny little sockets here that are empty, and something tells me those might be the aforementioned new Vistas. So these funny little things here, And what I believe used to plug in there are things called new Vistors, which look like tiny little cylinders. And I think what they are really small vacuum tubes in a metal jacket, if my memory serves me correctly. This also has a bottom cover that is not screwed on. Well, if I were to venture a guess, I would say that one, if not more, of these axial lead electrolytic capacitors is not the original. Just because they're all looking very different from each other. Dare we fire this thing up? Oh, no, I'm not going to bother. There's no point because it's missing the two new Vistors here and this tube right here. So, there's no point in firing this thing up. No, at some point we're going to have to make this into a project, get a schematic and do some serious troubleshooting. And I'm definitely not going to try and fire up the transmitter either, because the transmitter is essentially a slave to the receiver. The receiver houses the main brute force power supply. That's what that big black transformer was on the other unit. By the way, that's why it's recommended with old equipment like this that you bring it up on a Variac. That big transformer right there, you don't want to smoke that thing, because then you're going to be in a world of hurt. That's going to be a major expense to replace. Whereas if you smoke a resistor, hey, not the end of the world. But big transformer like that, you could have problems sourcing a replacement one, or at the very least, it's going to be pricey. So, anyways, so that uses this funky plug right here. I didn't even think to look. Does this have a bottom cover on it? Yeah, it does, because the feet are present, so that's good. And the screws are still in that one. So the gentleman I bought this stuff off of, he clearly was not the original owner, because he had no idea that this was a two-piece radio. He was under the impression that this was actually a like two separate radios, and part of the confusion was the fact that there's a third piece that I got. And let's take a look at that. Oh, so before we look at this next cream puff, I had this in the same box as the other stuff that I had gotten, and this is part of the original $50 lot. I had forgotten that I also had gotten the original service manual for the TS520S and the operator's manual for the 520S. So that's a nice find. I really like these old service manuals, especially Kenwood. I'm familiar with old Kenwood service manuals because I had quite a few of them back in the day when I used to work on hi-fi equipment. And the early vintage Kenwood manuals are really nice because they give you a lot of detail, a very detailed parts list, which that's not that uncommon. But the one thing I like that I kind of miss is you get these diagrams that actually show the silk screening on the actual PC board and the exact position of components. So when you find on the schematic somewhere that you're looking for Q2, sometimes it's hard to see on the board itself physically. It gets kind of crowded. When you got a nice clean picture like this, it's real easy to spot where Q2 is. And then you can go and look at the board and go, okay, I know I need to orient this, and know, all right, I know where I need to look for that. Kind of neat. All right, and so what ended up being in that third box is this unit right here. This is a Browning Eagle R27. These were made from manufactured from 1964 to 1966. So this is just a receiver. So there would have been another box that went with this. It would be the transmitter. It would be a smaller box, as opposed to when they came out with the Mark IIIs and the Mark IVs, where you had two big boxes that sat side by side. So unfortunately, the transmitter was nowhere to be found. The transmitter may have very well looked like something that, to the somebody who wasn't familiar with Browning radios, might not even realize that it was a radio transmitter, and it may have very well just gotten tossed. So that's the unfortunate part. This was actually, before they came out with this, they had the R2700 series. The interesting thing about the R2700 series, from what I could find online, is that the R2700 receiver was sold as a standalone unit, and then you could buy one of like 3 different models of transmitters to go with it. So I'm wondering whether or not maybe this was sold separately also, and then that you would buy the transmitter separately, and that could account for why the two got separated somehow. Although I kind of find it hard to believe that somebody would have bought just this receiver and never had the transmitter. Anyways, so it is what it is. This is, mid 1960s. This literally is like close to the year I was born. So that's how old this radio is. This radio is also missing the bottom, all the screws in the bottom and top covers, but at least the bottom and top covers are present. So even if this radio is completely non-operational, which I wouldn't be surprised if it was, I'd be surprised if it didn't have problems. I could see right off the bat that it's got the two 6DS4 New Vista tubes are still here, and if they're good, then I could put those in the Mark IV we were just looking at that was missing them. Although these are readily available online from anywhere. If you buy them in bulk, you can get them for, if you buy the Russian import military ones that are surplus, you can get them really cheap. But if you want like genuine RCA or something like that, they're going to cost you around 12 or 15 bucks a piece for those too. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of these tubes that is present here might be the missing tube in the other radio. But it actually looks fairly complete. All the tubes are present. We've got a filter capacitor here up in the corner, and interestingly enough, that's got that Sharpie written on top here, 4/84. So that tells me that somebody replaced the main filter capacitor back in 1984. Well, now with the radio turned over and the bottom cover off, we can take a look on the inside here, and again, a lot of really old looking stuff, but nothing to indicate that this thing was like really butchered or molested over the years. Nothing that appears to be like a really hack job type of repair. I've got this axial lead capacitor, looks suspiciously newer, and judging by the wire wrap and solder work I'm seeing over here, I would say we are probably looking at some sort of a repair here. We've got this axial lead 10 microfarad cap, and these 2 diodes right here also. They may very well be replacements. Got this discoloration on the wiring coming out of the transformer. I'm not sure what that is. That might even be mold. So anyways, this is complete enough that we could throw it on the Variac and see what happens. Well, let's see if we can't let the smoke genie out of this thing. So this current meter is doing something. Drawing a little bit of current. Alright, that's full voltage. And this is the 1.5 amp scale. I'm drawing hardly any current. All I'm getting is the panel light. And the filaments are lighting. So that would indicate to me that we've got probably missing DC voltages. Well guys, I don't want to get mired down and turn this video into a troubleshooting and repair of a Browning R27 radio from the 60s. But just morbid curiosity has led me to just take a quick look here, and I know why this thing's dead as a doornail. Even without a schematic, it's pretty easy to see that this is the brute force power supply over here. This is the main power transformer. This is an AC receptacle in the back. So power comes in and basically makes this receptacle live all the time. And then the AC line goes through this fuse on the back, which we know is good because the panel light works. And then it goes right into the primary. So the 2 wires coming out of this side of the transformer are the primary winding, And on the secondary side of the transformer, we have a winding here that goes right over to here, which is your 6.3 volt filament. And this winding right here is the secondary for the DC power supply. That comes right over to this little area right here where we have these two diodes, and these two diodes are in a configuration to give you full wave rectification. So instead of having a bridge rectifier in here, they just went with two diodes for full wave rectification. And I was able to see that there is a resistor right behind here that looks crispy. This up here is the main filter capacitor. I checked for DC voltage here. There's nothing there. I went right to the diodes, nothing there, and then I realized, could see this resistor up in the back here, which I'll give you a close-up of in a second. So it's a little hard to see, but right here is a resistor. And I'm looking at a schematic on my phone that I found online. Here's the power supply. There's that transformer. And right there's a resistor. And it goes over and it feeds the two diodes.